We come to the end of a perfect day. Almost perfect. If the video quality is good enough, you can see that I have a fat lip from falling down on the bus on the way home. That bothered the women in the house a whole lot more than me. Eddie and I had planned an adventure for today, the May Day school holiday. I wanted to figure out a bike route across to the Pirogova Outdoor Museum of Ukrainian architectural history. It's about 10 miles from our house on the other side of the river. The streets are too dangerous for a 6-year-old boy on a 12-inch bicycle. Now, you might think that this distance would be daunting. It would be to a lot of 6-year-olds, including the 6-year-old me. But Eddie is a real trooper. He learned how to ride without training wheels just last Thursday. And on Sunday we went 19 kilometers through the park and along a riverside bike path. You don't go very fast on a 12-inch bike with only one speed, but at this age the scenery is so interesting that speed doesn't matter much. Even at that, he's probably averages 6 or 7 miles an hour. So Saturday's weather was perfect, and Dad, who's normally pretty frugal, cheap is such a cheap sounding word, sprung for a $20 lunch along the riverfront and the best kid's bike helmet in the store on the way back. Which brings us to today. They'll let you take bicycles on the regional electric train called the Annichka. If we could use that, we'd get over the bridge to a green belt that stretches clear to Pirogova Park. Now, I didn't see any bike trails going clear through it, but not finding them didn't surprise me. I wanted to take a look for myself. Eddie told his friend Annichka, who told her mother Katya, and it was arranged that Annichka would come with us. Now, things are pretty informal here. Her mom didn't worry about it. She knows me, and she knows there aren't any bad parts of Kyiv. We rendezvoused at my front door at 8 o'clock sharp to make the 8:12 Marshutka. We got there just in the nick of time. The train was a minute early. The kids were enjoying riding on trains, and they went through the bananas and apples that Katya had packed. From the train, we walked about 2/3 of a mile up to the beginning of the park, which I'd never heard of. But it was really quite maintained. Bald Mountain Park, they call it, Lisi Gora. There were signs giving the history of the park, its use as a military fort, and identifying the common birds, mammals, and trees. Now, from the flats of the city, it doesn't look like much of a mountain, but it took us about 20 minutes to walk up a grade that the average cyclist would have rather pushed his bike than ridden. Eddie and Annichka marveled at every bit of nature along the way. The wildflowers are in bloom. Annichka ignored my admonition to leave them for the next person to admire, and Eddie found some supersized slugs and snails and other delightful creatures. I have to say with a bit of pride that Eddie knows what most of the trees are as well. Maple, ash, ash-leaf maple, buckeye, oak, and willow off the top of my head. Like any piece of urban real estate that calls itself a mountain, it's crowded with microwave and cellular towers. I gave a short, boring description of how a cell phone works, which the kids accepted with good grace. The asphalt ran out, but I was gratified to see the tire prints of mountain bikes along what was left of the route. Obviously, we weren't the first people to think of this. As we went over the hill, we heard a cuckoo. Though I live in a secluded wooded part of Kyiv, I regret to say that cuckoos and hedgehogs are less common than they were just 7 years ago when I moved in. I'm glad that this bit of habitat is still available to them. My bird book says that there are several species of hawks and other raptors in Kyiv. They should have been circling in the skies, but I didn't see them. The way out of Bald Mountain led us through the Ukrainian government meteorological station, an occasion for discussion of the instruments and how they measure wind speed. We got to the second park of our proposed series, and we had to cross Science Avenue, a rather busy city thoroughfare, which had a mom and pop store, which had some ice cream cones. Their good moods all the more elevated, we entered Golosivsky Park, Annichka yelled to me, asking if she could pet the goats. Goats? What goats? Yes, right there. Sure enough, there was a goat herd with a nanny goat and two nearly full-grown kids foraging in the park. The kids petted the goats, had a chat with the goat herd, and we went on our way. We started down a wide path over fairly level ground. If I had been more observant, I might have seen that there weren't any telltale tread marks. It got narrow fairly quickly and then steep. We came to a fork where each alternative looked equally well used. I chose down. Down at the bottom we found a fallen tree across a small creek. Eddie inspired both my fear and admiration as he clambered across it to the other side. The tree was only about 14 inches in diameter, and he was about 9 or 10 feet above the rocky creek bed. However, I had to admire his pluck and self-confidence. I didn't say anything, and when he came back the same way without betraying any fear and certainly without incident. The kids loved the creek. There were a lot of hollow trees, and we talked about the badgers and other animals that might inhabit them. We listened to the birds. Someday I have to become an expert on recognizing bird song. We got to the bottom, which was kind of marshy, but there was still a discernible trail. Annichka pointed out some bug blossoms, probably the plant that has a name ending in wart, bugwort, mugwort, I don't know. We took pictures. We followed the stream downhill. I felt quite confident because I knew that it had to end up in the big lake south of us on the map. However, as we went, the trail became less and less distinct, more and more blocked by fallen trees, and so wet that our feet started to get stuck. It was absolutely gorgeous, and the two 6-year-olds were unconcerned. Annichka stuck with me, and Eddie ventured to do some fairly risky things, delighted in tackling adversity head-on. Now, the chances of making it down to the lake looked more and more remote, and I had some concern that I didn't betray to the kids. At last I noticed a little trail a little ways up the side of the ravine, and we got there to get back to dry land. Pretty soon there was another trail heading straight up the side. We must have gained about 50 meters in altitude, climbing to a ridge from which we could easily see the lake I'd been looking for. I was comfortable. I knew where we were. And a little by the by, we asked directions from a guy we met on top who was out with his two kids. I got treated to a fairly civil discourse on why we should all be speaking Russian and how the other Slavic languages, Belarusian, Ukrainian, Kazakhstani, and so on, are no more than dialect. Well, I convinced him that I was an okay guy because I speak only Russian and none of those so-called dialects. I didn't mention that the reason I don't is because they're not dialects. They're so different I can't understand them. We headed back down the other side of the ridge, equally steep, to a much better trail that followed a little streamlet down to the lake. And from there we were able to walk back to civilization, buy a couple of sandwiches from a mom and pop store, catch a jitney bus back to the metro. We got home about 3:30. The kids had had a wonderful day. And that ends the story of a simple day's outing, only not so simple. I think it's rather remarkable in its ordinariness. And I'm going to start signing off with a take on Garrison Keillor. This is Graham Seibert signing off from Lake We Be Gone, where the men are strong, the women are good looking, and all the kids are above normal. Goodbye from Kyiv. Text of this is on LiveJournal.